One of the most serious social problems that is facing India, after the caste system and poverty, is interfaith or intercaste marriages. It is also known as mixed marriages. It is a marriage between partners professing different religions or castes. All major world religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Sikhism, prohibit mixed marriages. No Indian family would have agreed for their daughter or son to marry someone from a different religion or caste. If a Hindu boy fell in love with a Muslim girl, no Hindu pandit would agree to conduct their marriage. Likewise, no Muslim mazun or mullah would agree to conduct a nikah, marriage, between a Muslim girl and a Hindu boy. The lovers would be left with the only choice they had, and that was to elope and run away to a faraway city and live together without being married. Such relationships were illegal and sometimes punishable by law. The hapless couple would have to face condemnation and ire from both of their respective societies. They might not find any property owner who would be willing to give them an apartment to rent. In addition, their children might not be admitted to any school. In order to solve this problem, the government of India adopted a new marriage system which is called a court marriage. Any couple not able to marry within the religious system could get married by the court. While this is lawful, old habits die hard and society was slow to accept such unions. In many cases, Muslim girls who defied their families and married their Hindu boyfriends were killed by their Muslim fathers or brothers. If they weren't killed, they were considered outcasts and their children were considered bastards. This social problem was not confined to Muslims and Hindus only, but to other interfaith lovers from Sikh, Jain, Christian, Buddhist, and Parsi devotions. Parsi is a distinct religious community in India. At the time of the Arab invasion of Iran, the dominant religion of the region was Zoroastrianism. The Iranians rebelled against the forced conversion to Islam by the Arab invaders for almost 200 years. After many failed attempts to free the country from Arab domination, the Iranians were forced to either pay heavy jizya or to convert to Islam. If the Iranian Zoroastrians refused to pay the jizya or convert to Islam, then they would be killed. During this time, many Iranians who are now called Parsis in India rejected the three options and instead chose to take refuge by fleeing from Iran to India. One of the most famous situations of interfaith relation was the love story between a Muslim boy and his Christian girlfriend in Borivali, Mumbai. Real names are changed for privacy and protection. Muslims are the biggest minority in India while Christians, the smallest. There are 150 million Muslims to the 24 million Christians in India. Hindus number more than 850 million. This particular Christian girl fell in love with her Muslim neighbor when she was very young. Their affair started when she was 16. According to Indian law, she was still considered a minor. Her Muslim boyfriend was 21 years old. The girl's father hated all Muslims and considered them to be two-legged animals. He pitted their women, and he looked upon them as victims. He believed that Muslims were the most dangerous of all creatures in the universe. He blamed them for the terrorist attacks happening all over the world, and he believed their holy book to be a terrorist manual. Anyway, the unwavering hatred of the Christian man, Mr. Varghese, toward Muslims was built on a strong foundation. He had a son and a daughter by his lovely wife, Susan. His son, Thomas, once held a very good job. At that time, Thomas worked at an import and export company in Nariman Point in downtown Mumbai. He earned a large salary of half a lakh per month. Every month, the son brought home 50,000 rupees. Mr. Varghese used to love his son to the point of worshipping him. His son was highly educated and a very committed Christian. He was not yet married, however. His parents found for him a beautiful, fair, and highly educated girl. Thomas and the girl gladly accepted the plan of their parents and were engaged to each other. The girl likewise was a committed Christian and held a high-paid job in Churchgate at Bombay downtown. Just a month before their arranged marriage was scheduled to take place, something terrible happened. Mr. Varghese had previously worked in the railway station. His wife was a college teacher. Rita, their daughter, was still in school, registered in grade 10. They were a very happy family. Unfortunately, their happiness was shattered one day, when their son was killed in a very brutal way. He was blown to pieces by a bomb that Muslim terrorists had planted in the first-class coach of the local train. Mr. Varghese's life was shattered by the cruel way his son was killed. He became so grieved of his son he could barely function from day to day. From that day on, he started to hate all Muslims. He held every Muslim responsible for the untimely death of his beloved son Thomas. Although, not every Muslim man was a terrorist, Mr. Varghese generalized and considered all Muslim men terrorists. He began to hate them all, with an unequaled hatred. While Mr. Varghese was struggling with the death of his only son, he found out that his one and only daughter was in love with a Muslim boy. He was outraged and stood firmly against his daughter's involvement with a wretched Muslim. The boy was a grade 10 dropout and jobless and had no future plans. Mr. Varghese threatened the Muslim boy with death if he ever came near his daughter again. Rita, being a young teenager, could not stop how she felt for the Muslim neighbor she had grown to love. They could not get married because she was just 16. Indian law would allow a court marriage at 17, if parental consent was given. In this case, the only way Rita was going to get married was to wait for her 18th birthday to fulfill the requirements for a court marriage without the expressed consent of her parents. Although Mr. Varghese tried to scare the Muslim boy by threatening to kill him, the boy did not break off his friendship with his daughter. The two lovers continued to meet in secret. When it became clear to Mr. Varghese that the Muslim boy was not going to leave his daughter alone, he found a Christian boy in his church and promised to give him his daughter in marriage as soon as she reached age 17. He even paid the family of the boy 300,000 of rupees as Rita's dowry. That accepted, Rita found herself betrothed to a Christian boy that she was to marry the moment she turned 17. In India, everything seemed to be opposite the rest of the world. The girl would pay the dowry in her marriage instead of the boy. When a girl reached a certain age, her parents would look for a boy and pay him a dowry to marry their daughter. This gives rise to another vile custom. Many married girls were burned alive by their in-laws. Some evil in-laws burned their daughter-in-law so that their son could find another girl to marry and receive another dowry from the daughter's parents. The victim was usually burned in the kitchen so that her husband and in-laws could say to the police that she died accidentally when the gas cylinder exploded on her. Sometimes, these families would tell the police their daughter-in-law committed suicide. When the Muslim lover came to know that the marriage of his Christian girlfriend was already arranged by her father, he did two things to block it. First, he brainwashed his Christian girlfriend and made her accept Islam. He promised to take her to another city and marry her as a Muslim girl. The girl believed him and went with him to a nearby mosque, and embraced Islam. Then her Muslim lover changed her name from Rita to Rabia. Secondly, fearing that her conversion to Islam was not enough blockage, the lover impregnated his beloved, on purpose. He normally used condoms, but this time he abstained from using one because he thought it would deter her parents from being able to go forward with the promised marriage. He reasoned that, if neither her conversion to Islam nor her pregnancy could stop her marriage to her Christian fiancé, he would kidnap her and run away with her to another city. After that, the Muslim lover phoned the fiancé of his girlfriend, informing him about his relationship with his fiancée and that she was carrying his child. He also informed him that Rita had embraced Islam and changed her name to Rabia. The fiancé approached the father of the girl and told him about the pregnancy of his daughter and her conversion to Islam, and he thereby broke the engagement. Indians are like the Arabs when it came to the virtues of family. A girl known to engage in premarital sex, even once, was no longer considered marriage material. Even if the affair happened 10 years ago, it would haunt her the rest of her life, as if she had a criminal record. It did not matter whether she actually had sex with her lover or not, she would be counted as a lost cause. Her parents would never find a boy to marry her, no matter how much dowry they offered to pay. The Varghese family had two options: they would either allow their impregnated daughter to marry her boyfriend or take the matter to court. If they decided to follow the first option, they had to wait for 6 months until their daughter reached 17 and then marry her to her Muslim lover. If they decided to punish the lover for statutory rape, then they could lodge a police complaint. The court might convict the lover with rape of a minor and sentence him to at least 10 years in prison. The second option would punish their neighbor, but it would not repair the damage and humiliation they would suffer amongst their South Indian Christian community. They would never find again a Christian family from among their community that would be willingly to allow their son to marry a girl who had been impregnated by a Masla. The word Masla is a racist term and used in India the same way the word Paki is used in the UK and nigger in the US. The third problem the Varghese family had to come to terms with was, how does a Christian family bring up a bastard child among the South Indian Christian community in Mumbai? Legally their daughter would not be allowed to abort the baby, because she was still a minor. She could abort the baby if the case reached the courts, and it was proven that her Muslim boyfriend had impregnated her. If her boyfriend denied that he impregnated her, then the court had to wait until the child was born, and a DNA test would be carried out to determine paternity. Meanwhile, the scandal would permeate their entire neighborhood, and the parents would have to deal with much embarrassment and humiliation in their community. Taking all those problems into consideration, Mrs. Varghese suggested that they should allow their daughter to marry her Muslim boyfriend. However, Mr. Varghese had other ulterior motives in mind. When his beloved son was blown up inside the local train by a bomb blast planted by Muslim terrorists, he considered all Muslims in the world responsible for the cruel death of his son. Likewise, when his only daughter was impregnated, on purpose, by her Muslim lover, he felt she had been raped by all the Muslim men in the world. And more than that, his daughter's conversion to Islam was something that he could never come to terms with. He would rather she was dead than bring stigma to the family by becoming a Masla. Therefore, Mr. Varghese decided to take revenge on the rapist of his daughter. He knew that if he killed him, he would make him suffer for a short time before he died. He decided to punish him in a way that he would suffer and feel the effects the rest of his life. As he had impregnated his daughter on purpose and convinced her to convert to Islam, spoiled her life and destroyed the name of her parents, Mr. Varghese wanted the Muslim boy and his family to suffer the rest of their lives, too. He wanted to make this young Muslim man long for death, hoping to thereby relieve himself from the suffering that he would experience every second of every minute in his life. As it was, relief for him was only if he took his own life. He therefore allowed his wife and daughter to believe that he was willing to forgive his Muslim neighbor, and he agreed for them to get legally married. He said that, as soon as his daughter reached the age of 17, he was going to allow her to marry her Muslim lover. Then, the parents told their daughter to go to her Muslim boyfriend and inform him about the family's decision. After that, Mr. Varghese told his daughter to invite her boyfriend for a meal in their home. He promised his daughter, that when her boyfriend came to the evening meal, they would decide the date of their marriage. When the Muslim boyfriend came to enjoy food with the family and receive the good news of his upcoming marriage, Mr. Varghese carried out his planned revenge. He splashed caustic acid in the face of the young man. Had Mr. Varghese soaked him with kerosene and set him on fire, his pain would have been severe but short. His daughter's lover was blinded by the burning acid and began to run around, stumbling over the chairs and tables. He then fell on the floor and began to roll around and scream from the terrible pain. Mr. Varghese ignored the obvious suffering of the Muslim boy and the crying of his daughter. To Mr. Varghese, he was a snake and he was being chased by the devil with a pitchfork. He did not even stop to talk to his wife who was shouting in his face. He left his house immediately, went to the nearest police station, and turned himself in. Shortly after his arrest, the police arrived at the scene of the crime. The Muslim boy was rushed to the nearest hospital still screaming and crying from the terrible pain. He survived, but his face was totally marred and scarred by the burning acid. His nose, eyes, eyebrows, and lips were completely erased from his face. No human being could look at his hideous face without throwing up or turning away. The cruel wrath of her father and what he had done to her future husband, led the daughter to take her own life. She locked herself inside the washroom, cut her own wrist, and bled to death. While he was waiting for his trial, Mr. Varghese learned of his daughter's suicide, and this only increased his hatred toward Muslims. He felt that Muslims were responsible for the destruction of his family.